Okay, gain down a bit. And let's see. It won't. Alrighty, hang on just a second. Let's see if we can scrunch it. Yes, we can. Hello, humans. Trying to get everything set up here so it'll make sense. My date's off. You're right. Hang on, I forgot about that. We'll just, I don't know if it allows me to edit it here. Cool. Love Windows. It's goofy at times, but it doesn't show up there, though. Okay, all right, we'll remove it. Okay, so the thing I wanted to talk about today has to do with these strange energies from space and the effects that we've been having on all of us humans since, well, probably since the 50s, simply because we're mostly unaware of them. You can't see the buggers, and they are impacting us, though. Come on there. Okay, we got you. Hang on. All right. This stuff's important simply because of the copyright theft shit. And the algos on YouTube that are run to automatically snatch up high view within this range, so they don't go after the people that like PewDiePie or somebody that's got a lot of tremendous amounts of views, because these people have some money and they can sue and all this kind of shit. But there appears to be a middle tier of YouTube producers whose vids are flipped out by algos, spun back up into YouTube under these fake accounts in order to nail the advertising dollars. So I'm doing what I can to prevent people from bitching at me, thinking that an old one is a new one. Okay, so I don't have a cold, but I've been down on the beach, and the weather here is a little bit dodgy at the moment. Okay, so I'll get right to it. I did my exercise, or at least part of it, and but I haven't done the eating part, so we gotta get moving here. Okay, so I actually have visual aids. Today we're going to talk about strange energies from space, but the title of this is Ancient Chinese History and Why Should I Give a Shit? And we'll answer the last part of that right now and say that you'd give a shit because a lot of ancient Chinese history unfolded in a period of time in which the Earth was receiving energies such as we are encountering now. And so it pays to understand what has happened in the past so that we can hopefully avoid some of the problems, or, at least in our own lives, if not in a general sense, right? And so the period of time we're talking about in ancient Chinese history can be characterized in a loose fashion, and I'm not going to use dates and stuff. I'm going to use a broad brush here because it spans several hundred years, maybe almost 600 years. And it was the period of time from that was basically the transition in China from Taoism dominant to Confucianism dominant. They both have very similar elements, but the core focus on a couple of things within their self-description, how their self-created paradigms was different, so they actually felt themselves at odds frequently. Taoism had been prevalent in China for a long period of time, and then Confucianism arose and Confucianism grew stronger. And this is actually, Confucianism is a term that's applied by Westerners. What we're talking about is the school that was built up around this particular philosophy that was entitled Kung Fu Tse, which is supreme in internal work, or internal harmony, or the work of internal harmony, or a number of different translations. Anyway, so the Confucius are, and the Taoists are existing in a very aggressive society that was filled with less than cohesive political structures, and felt as though the breakup of things was going on at the times that both of these schools of thought were inexistent and being widely held and worked. They were people making more Taoist thought. They were thinking about making it more refined, etc., right? Anyway, so during the period of time, there actually was a period where, this is like the Shaolin Temple, when those kind of guys, when they arose. There were a lot of bandits, there was a lot of banditry, there was piracy, all different kinds of things going on in the Chinese social order that, I know I need mods, I'll get on it sometime. There was a discord in the Chinese social order such that people clung to philosophical approaches, what we would call ideologies today. Ideology is a small part of a philosophical approach to life, though, because an ideology is a rigid set of dogma that you just repeat until you've got it, and then that's all you can respond to. A philosophical approach means a reason of thinking about it. And so people thought about Taoism, they thought about what we call Confucianism, and they came to the opinion that certain things were within reality and could be acted upon reasonably safely. And then they sort of clung to their views once they'd formed these philosophies, which weren't, from our viewpoint, weren't that much different. So we had the rise of these two main eras. Now, at the same time, China's being flooded with Buddhism. Buddhism has a characteristic that most Westerners don't acknowledge, and that is it's misogynist as hell. Okay, Buddha did not like women. He didn't want women adherents. He didn't want women anywhere near him. And you can sort of understand it because of the history of Buddhism. And if you look at how he lived before, if you look at how Shakyamuni lived before he became Buddha, before he set out on the path, as a person of privilege and all of that kind of stuff, you see why he is as he is. In any event, though, the Buddhism porked out part of the Chinese society, while Taoism and Confucianism were trying to work out their assorted differences, right? And so the nature of the discord between Taoism and Confucianism is key to what I'm going to talk about here, because that period of time was under the intense period of solar minimum, as we are now, a grand solar minimum, an ice age, strange energies from space coming on down. The thing about these periods of time is the sun actually shrinks its corona, and the energies whip around the sun because it's not so big and doesn't catch them. And the sun's corona, being plasma, wants to catch all of the crap that's flying through space, all these high energy particles. And so during that period of time in China, they were being bombarded the same way we are now. Previous periods in China, which is the largest nation on the planet, the most populous nation on the planet, the longest history on the planet, absent the Indian subcontinent, show that, time of Genghis Khan, okay, Temujin, who came through, who was Mongolian and took over China. All of these periods of time, the great upheavals of humanity were, as we are now, under an umbrella of increased radiation from space. We can't see it, we can't smell it, but it is nonetheless affecting us all. It's affecting all of consciousness on Earth, not just us. It's affecting alligators, dogs, bird, bees, worms, etc., etc. Well, maybe not the worms so much, because the planet actually absorbs quite a bit of the high energy particles before they penetrate too far. But in any event, so all this shit's going down. Literally, actually, on us. I'm under a metal roof, so maybe not as many of them are to hit my bald head, but nonetheless, it is out and about in the generalized population, and we're all exposed to it, and we just don't have that in our consciousness, so we think we are reacting as we should react, that is to say, in a normal, for us, fashion, and we're not. because our ability to judge our own normalcy, as well as the normalcy of the people around us, the sanity, if you will, behavior of the people around us, is being affected by our perceptions, being affected by the rays from space coming in and zinging through your brain and, that kind of thing, right? And people are going to laugh and say, well, this can't happen, blah, blah, blah. But note that in 2003, we lost 5% of our atmosphere, 15% by volume. And when it blew off in a cosmic ray storm. In 2003 was when we had our Banda Aceh earthquake. 300,000 plus people died. That earthquake was triggered because of these strange energies from space. And we're in this period until at least 2058. That's my projection based on some back-of-the-envelope math as to when it would peak out and start really degrading down, right? Okay, so within these strange energies from space, we can, as previous Chinese philosophers and really smart sons of bitches recognized in their own day, a person can think their way around the situation that we're in now. And it may be that the universe does this shit to us exactly to force us into, having epigenetic evolutionary triggers. This is the underlying thinking that David Wilcock and all these other people have labeled ascension, all right? Is that there's going to be something from the sun. Well, it's actually stuff coming around the sun. So they're wrong there. But their idea is that there's going to be somehow a giant uplifting, and the birds will sing, the sun will come out, and harmony and peace will run across the planet. Maybe 500 years from now. But the way these periods go, they're usually rather trying and challenging for humans. Okay, but nonetheless, get back to my point. It is our genetics, our DNA, that is actually being triggered by these rays from space, and that is undoubtedly a universal function. It wants us to go through this. There is undoubtedly some kind of benefit to it. Whether or not we can examine and enjoy that benefit as individuals is unknown to me, but I think the species is going to be benefiting from it. In other words, if the sun's going to do this to us and cause a round of mutation, it's probably in our own best interest, so to speak, to be mutated that particular direction, because maybe, we got some other shit coming the universe is preparing us for. That's the way, in my analysis, the paradigm in which we live. Our common shared reality, that's the way shit works. Universe provides you with the lessons. It's up to you to decide how to react to it. And so, anyways, getting back to our Chinese cousins, right? So you got people like Lao Tzu and some of these other individuals. Archetypical names, labels, appellations to people that may have been groups, doesn't matter. The point is that there was an examination by the school of people that we call Taoist that examined the situation in which they found themselves, the sudden and unexpected and violent upheaval within their own society and even within themselves. And so some of them stopped and said, hey, as an aside, probably didn't hurt that they went and did this in caves, right? A lot of earth sucks up radiation. But in any event, so they said, hey, we better examine ourselves during this period of time so that we can, so that we can actually, in real time, alter our behavior, because we recognize that there's impulses within us that are making us behave badly, or trying to make us behave badly. And so in that sense, this is the you don't know why I got mad, it's road rage, you just can't help it. All of a sudden you come to and you realize, holy shit, I'm out here causing a scene, I've been bitch slapping this guy back and forth, and it's totally uncalled for, blah, 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 blah. Okay, and so they actually recognized that was going on, and they said, here are ways that we can get around this. And so what they did was this. The Taoists, off of Lao Tzu, had what they call the three treasures and the 5 golden virtues. And they basically said, okay, so they basically said that if you were aware of your position within the 3 virtues, and within the five golden virtues and within the three treasures, and you maintain these in your brain as you're doing stuff, then you can guide your thinking at any given moment simply by analyzing, okay, here's the circumstances, what's going on, where does it fit with this continuum, and then you can decide if you're reacting appropriately or not, right? And so it's actually a fairly good system. I mean, it was systematically thought out. They figured out how things worked, and then they discussed it in some of their literature. And so Lao Tzu's, these are my visual aids. So Lao Tzu's treasures are simplicity, compassion, and humility, okay? Without simplicity, you can't be magnanimous. In other words, if you live over your means and you're seriously in debt, you can't share with people. If you live under your means and you can, then you can share, right? So there's generosity that arises from simplicity. And the second one is compassion. Without compassion, you cannot be courageous. You don't love another person and then you can't have empathy, and you're not able to find yourself in their shoes, and therefore you will never come to their defense. You just sit there and watch them be slaughtered and say, okay, fine, not me. All right, so compassion is like really required. And humility, okay, so their thinking on this was that only the humble have authority from the universe to lead. So the man that comes to you and says, I'm a great leader, you don't want to be dealing with that fucker, right? He's trying to get on top and control shit. So anyway, so they had these three treasures, and the Taoists decided that they would organize their society around the three treasures and the five golden virtues. Now we note that the Confucius took the five golden virtues, rewrapped them, and used them as the core for their statist society. So let's stop for a second and examine really the difference between the Taoists and the Confucius crowd. And that is an idea of whether the state had ultimate authority to exist or the individual had ultimate authority to exist. In other words, the Taoists felt that chaos was a natural order of universe, and it was up to every person to participate in that chaos and try and work in gradual, generally harmonious way towards some form of order, or at least not add to the shit, right? Whereas the Confucian idea is that the state had primary order or primary claim to right to exist, and any individual that was not contributing to the existence of the state was basically expendable, could be taken out of the picture without feeling bad, because it was necessary that the state exist, that everybody could exist. And it was at a time when the transition from the Taoist was from a time of discordant warlords, as Chinese people were moving into a more orderly series of empires, right? In which the empires actually grew and had civil servants and were quite substantial. And at that period, the Confucius crowd recognized that, well, shit, if the state goes, we all go. Because we had crossed that line of what we can call like local subsistence. And we're there now. Our society is there now. I'm drinking coffee that came across the damn ocean from Hawaii. And so, without the state, I won't have that coffee. Now, it's a trivial example, right? But it nonetheless points to the idea of our interconnectedness in a way that many of us don't realize. So this is why I wanted to do this, was actually for C.W. Chanter. Okay, because I like C.W. Chanter. I don't agree with him a lot of the times. I don't want him to stop giving me shit, by the way. That's the function of people, right? You got to call people on shit. Anyway, so I want to let C.W. know, though, from an old man's perspective to a young man, why he finds himself in some periods of mental distress on the shit that's going around him, and maybe how to better navigate through that mental distress, right? And so we'll go to this next step here, which is this. Alrighty. We'll find out a little bit. Anyway, so the CW is mental distress, like all of us, okay? That shit gets out of hand because people get whipped up over things, and we cannot empathize. We can't identify with why they're getting whipped up, or their stated position on why they're getting whipped up, because frequently they don't know. They're attaching an agitated emotional state to an idea that may or may not have some facts behind it, and then trying to push that whole thing out of themselves. You notice there's a shitload of projection. Everybody's projecting crap right and left. Well, it's not us guys, or it is us, but it's us being triggered by strange energies from space, zinging through the planet, causing changes in the atmosphere and the whole damn thing. And so it behooves one, in my opinion, to take note of our own emotional reaction to things and analyze a bit, before going on out and trying to smack the guy across the face. Because, like I say, it may not be warranted. It may be entirely in ourselves. And so if it is in ourselves and we're responding to these strange energies, then we might push it out and create ripples that our whole planet would be a lot better off if they didn't exist there. And so that's what the Chinese discovered. They discovered the same line of reasoning, that shit ain't right. There is something we can do about it because we're good conscious beings, but we got to work it. And they did. And then eventually the strange rays from space got less, the atmosphere grew, and the nature of China changed, and both Taoism and Confucianism were pushed aside. And then later on, we had another period of upheaval that we called the Great Wars, World War I, World War II, and we're in that same cycle of strange energies from space. Okay, so the guiding principle for C.W. Chanter is that he needs to start thinking of a continuum, okay? And not the space-time continuum, but a continuum of human emotional interest. And so the Chinese identified these 5 golden virtues, the Taoists did, and then the Confucius took them over and internalized them as their core ethos. And these 5 golden virtues were what holds a society together, okay? And we have to acknowledge that, C.W. Chanter could maybe sometime in the future, if I didn't like him so much, say something that would really piss me off, right? Or I may be struck by strange energies from space, and I might get pissed off at C.W. Chanter's attitude on something and say, to hell with them. Let's draw a line in the middle of the country and two of us separate. You can have that half, I'll have this half. And then everybody else does it, and the next thing you know, you got fractionalization, all the hell going, which ain't good for any of us. Because bear in mind, the whole planet is going through this shit. So it's not like any values will be respected unless there is a conscious effort to analyze ourselves within a value structure and apply these as a rule. In other words, internalization of the shit you learned before you were 7 years old, at your dad's knee, will only get us so far in this period of time, because you'll start reacting as though conditions existed now as they did then, and they don't. And so we have to be aware of this. We don't have to. Humanity go to hell. That's just my opinion. But anyway, so for C.W. Chanter, here's our 5 basic criteria for keeping a social order together, and in a way that humans think about them, and I'll explain this real quick, okay? We have compassion, equality, loyalty, maturity, and honor. And this is the 5 golden virtues of the Taoists. This is basically, love the fellow man kind of shit, right? Equality is feel equality within ourselves to everybody else, which basically means be fair to everybody else. Do unto others stuff, right? And loyalty is pretty much self-explanatory. If you're not loyal, that's one of the cohesions. These are all cohesive bonds. These are the fascia that bind all of our disparate parts together into a whole, however bizarre and fucked up that whole may be. And maturity is the ability of an individual to accept there are things outside ourselves that we can't control, that may dominate us, and may force us to change. That's maturity. That's the ability to recognize that, you are not the ultimate authority, right? And then honor is the ability to honor, to respect, to sanctify, to make sacred all of the others. And so you need this to enforce all of the others, right? And this is why we find in our society people gravitating to each and every one of these particular virtues. And so this is why we find our society fractionalized, where people are like hell-bent for religion. Well, they're down here seeking for that sanctity and honor that they want to find in their social order in their life. Okay? Other people are like authoritarians, and they're seeking for the maturity that they're lacking in their own personal life. They want to project it, manifest it. They want to, understand it, encounter it, and be educated about it, whether they recognize it or not. Same thing of loyalty. And then you got equality, right? Fairness. People have to be fair to each other. You got to be fair at every opportunity, even at a cost to yourself, in order to ensure that that balance is in existence. Equality equals balance. If the center is not larger, you don't get the teeter-totter effect. Everything stays on one side or the other. So the center needs to be the largest part of this, right? Compassion. It's like if you don't have compassion, you lose those parts of your society that I can speak from experience are potentially your greatest asset, although unknown. So without compassion, all the mentally ill are killed, right? Hitler was really stupid. Many of the people he killed, many of the Germans he killed, that he labeled on other terms, gypsies or Jews, whatever, many of these people were mentally ill. But it is from the mental illness of our society in general that religion springs. Go and listen to the lecture at Stanford on the religiosity of biology, or biological implications of religiosity. And from there, we also have genius. As we say in our language, it's a fine line between genius and madness. And the thing is, I can tell you from personal experience, that fine line is not a constant. You stray back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. We all do, right? Because we're all the same, basically. So, and that's what the Chinese discovered. So these are the five golden virtues. Now what happens is you get groups, and this is where we're at the moment. You get groupthink that values one set or one of these five virtues over all of the others. And thus we get into the shit hole that we're in now, these shit stores, right? And so let's look at the Corey Good episode here, right? You can look and you can see that, well, he wasn't very loving. He didn't value equality or fairness. He wasn't particularly loyal to the people around him, but he was hell-bent on understanding, controlling authority. And so he was triggering on maturity, and that's all he really cared about. So he didn't care about the rest of the stuff that holds the UFO society together, as all of us demonstrated. Okay, so I care about honor, and so I honor C.W. Chanter wherever he is on this particular spectrum, and I work with him. And so shit happens. Things get done, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Not to labor C.W. Chanter's role in this or to denigrate anybody else's role in this. It was the collective. It was all of us on the five virtues that led to the conclusion that we have at this moment. And so what I wanted to throw out here for CW to consider is that I personally, I think this may shock him, I'm the most outrageously liberal individual you will ever run into. There's just no way I can qualify it that would give you a sense of what I mean by that. But trust me, I have been stuck in the compassion disease in my past, and it held me for over 15 years. And I understand that people get stuck in compassion and equality. And this seems to be the area that you're focusing on at the moment. And, no offense to you at all, I think you want to look at these other three down here when you examine those two, because we need the balance of all five in order for us all to continue. Or we have to decide not to, not my decision. I can't tell people what to do about this kind of thing. Q is complicated. There was a trip code hack. There was a change from 4chan to 8chan, and the linguistics changed. Conclusions about why and what happened with that linguistic change are varied, and I have not had time because it occurred when I was extremely ill and then went into surgery, I have not had time to catch up and see if I can analyze and see what we're at today. So the stuff is coming out today, I basically just don't pay attention to because I can't vouch for veracity anymore. So anyway, though, this brings us, to our debate in our education of Jordan Sather. Should he be listening? That's fine. I mean, I'm honest about this, but I like Jordan Sather. He's kind of a cool fucktard. He's not educated. And I understand he dropped out of school, the way I did. I'm not a college graduate or anything. And but that doesn't mean you like Mark Twain says, never let your school interfere with your education. And so, Jordan Sather, if you're under 40 years old and you're not reading books, 6 to 8 hours a day, you're doing yourself a disservice, because this is the time you can really grasp that knowledge and you can make yourself the person you want to be in your 40s. But don't imagine yourself to be that person now. Okay, so I guess that's it. I'm able to wrap it up quick and be able to get out there and get some food. So, all right, so we can ask some questions for a few minutes, and then I'm going to go and get some chow. And let's see what we've got here. It doesn't have to be in all caps or anything. Yeah, I like Jordan. Yeah, he's okay. Audiobooks are okay, and people learn in different ways. I'm not to imply that visual reading is the only way to take it in. I actually found it was a lot easier to absorb Thinking in Destiny the second time when I heard it on audiobook as opposed to reading through the 1,008 pages. And I analyzed it as I was going through there. Tether's a piece of shit guy. Tether is part of the pedophile network that got involved in coins out of Southern California and migrated over to Asia. And they tried to do this one-to-one tie-in and be a stablecoin, and they blew it. So I wouldn't invest and expect it to be huge or anything. But the problem is, okay, even shitcoin you can make money on, and people will be able to do so over these next probably 2 years before things start really breaking up. But we're in that period of time where the economic black swans are coming home to roost, and so we're in chaos that existed, the same kind of chaos, emotionally, financially, politically, militarily, that existed with the Taoists and the Confucius. They had a terrible economic situation. This was the period of time in which the 5 Bushel League was formed. It was the most successful in history self-care healthcare system, and it was run by a group of Taoists that were essentially the managers of the system, and it encompassed a large chunk of China up towards the northwest, and was self-administering and was 100% sort of profitable, and everybody got into it. They called it the 5 Bushel League because every year your fee was 5 bushels of rice, and you paid that. The Taoists took care of you, and they were serious about it in the sense that if your farm was down on the plains and they saw the invading bandits coming to steal the food from you, they'd swoop down out of the monastery and kick ass. it was healthcare at a level we don't have now. So yeah, I like the Russians though, guy, and Antarctica is anybody's continent, right? I mean, it's one of those things where if you respect the authority of the people that made that treaty, well, then you can't do X, Y, Z there. But it's a matter of, do I respect the authority of those people that made that treaty, or would I want to get a chunk of that continent myself because it is hugely, vastly resource rich? We're in a solar minimum. We're going to need those resources. I haven't studied Tron enough recently to be able to comment on how well they're going to do. There's a lot of people that are, I think, forming like a little trading league around that. So, so we may see some big pushes there. I don't work with Reggie Middleton per se. He's in a situation where I don't want to pollute his relationship with the power that be by attaching my name to any of his stuff, but I send him ideas occasionally. We'll answer questions as he needs it. Yeah, blockchain voting can work. There's about 6 or 8 different schemes out there that are really quite valid. Check with those before reinventing a wheel. Yeah, the Arctic is the same issue, right, as with Antarctica. Hugely resource rich. In the 40s, 50s, and 60s, the Soviets built and manned and maintained a whole series of nuclear-powered lighthouses across the Arctic with the intent of being able to do cross-Arctic ocean transport. It's cheaper to move stuff by boat than any other form on the planet. It's a better investment of your diesel fuel to push something across the water than to try and push something across the land. You can do big loads cheaper, and that was their idea. These nuclear-powered lighthouses were phenomenal construction that they made, and it gave the Russians a long-standing claim to being like Arctic masters, right? Not only territorial claim, but also skill sets. And they, in the 70s and the 80s, they sort of waned. They didn't put money into them, and then there was the chaos of the 80s and 90s and the Russian social order, and the collapse, or Soviet social order, and the collapse and reemergence of Russia. And there are some indications in some of the publications that there's another effort to reestablish those nuclear-powered, or at least clean them up. I mean, that was the focus of the article I was reading. Clean up these nuclear-powered lighthouses, and so they're not a radioactive danger. Either way, or rather, whatever the motivation, whether they want to reconstitute them or whether they want to clean them up, shows their intent to reclaim that giant boundary of the Arctic that's across the top of Russia, and in way over past Siberia. So it's going to be a big thing in a lot of your guys' lives for like the next 50 years. And curiously, my data sets had always maintained that in spite of the change of the weather into a mini ice age, we would become cold and extreme environment experts. So we've had stuff in the data sets going back a long time about some kind of an Irish power generation scheme that's going to be used off of the coast of Ireland way deep in the waters there. And then we've also had stuff about Antarctica and the Arctic, and very basically it's like the population of the planet is spreading around into those parts of the world, for fun and profit. So that kind of stuff will be happening. Let's see. Yeah, 3,000, yeah, exactly on the sun. The 3,000 Kelvin level is what's going to, it's ever since 2003 we've been under the impact of it. And it's going to get worse. It's going to peak out. I don't know if the getting worse is going to be that you can't go outside the buildings and stuff during the middle of the day. We have petroglyphs that are of an unknown age that are carved in rock that can be found on northern hemisphere continents, spread very widely, and in some places in Africa and in the Andes area that suggest that the cave dwellers at the time encountered a similar period that spanned many generations, in which they would have to check by sticking dry timbers, sticks outside the door, the area of the cave, to see if they would ignite, to actually basically check to see what the radiation levels are. And the coincident development in these cave structures, especially where there were a lot of people living, of the petroglyphs and doorways, suggests that indeed this was not fanciful thinking. That, in other words, we invented doors to keep radiation splash out of our walls, to keep radiation splash out of our caves. And it was coincident with the construction of the petroglyphs. In other words, we find some of the petroglyphs near the edges of the openings of the caves that had been buried, had been covered up by mound walls that had been made there, and then other petroglyphs that were younger that went back further into the cave. So we can make the assumption that the radiation levels got worse and they had retreat, and then some smart humans decide, well, let's just put more rocks in the beginning, right? Quantum blockchain is it's like a sheet of paper. I write some numbers on it, and you look at it. We both agree we're looking at the same numbers, and then I hand it to you, and you hand it to somebody else, and you hand it to somebody else. It's a dumb database. No quantum crap involved there at all. I think the law of one material was channeled. I think the people that did channeling will suffer in the next life, and the stuff that was delivered existed here already. Of no new material. It is not even rehashed, and is basically not worth my time to consider. I wouldn't try and live my life by it. I mean, look, here's the logic that you see out of David Wilcock. Way back when the guy was like a kid, maybe in the 90s. So I don't know when he actually said this, but I heard him on the radio say it. Somebody asked him in a question, probably on Coast to Coast, and question and answer or something. They said, well, David, do you take vitamins? And he said, no, he didn't take vitamins. And here was his reasoning, that he didn't want to get addicted to them. And so, I could see you saying that about heroin. Heroin makes you feel good, but you don't want to get addicted to it, okay? Vitamins make you feel good, but vitamin equals necessary for life that your body doesn't produce. You need to take vitamins, right? just to maintain an even strain. And so his reading on it was so flawed that from that point on, the very first thing I would do in counting any David Wilcock material is to jump to the bottom, see what his conclusion is, and say, oh, well, that's goofy as hell. And I'm not going to read his strange chain of logic that gets him down there. He supposedly had the opinion about vitamins because some guy in I want to say an airport or some transportation center told him this, and he said that this guy was an insider, and the guy insider said, oh, don't ever take those, your body will get addicted to it. Now, okay, so I understand Stoicism, right? The idea of hormesis, that which can kill you at a large dose, you might be able to get strengthened by at small doses, right? And so that makes sense, but not with vitamin. In fact, my opinion is we need to be chugging the damn shit down because of the not only the extra strange radiation from space, and things like vitamin C and vitamin D and E help you deal with radiation in your body of all kinds. Not only that, but because we've never had optimal levels. We are not living in the environment in which our bodies were created, and so we don't have optimal levels of vitamins coming in through our diet, nor minerals, and we actually actively have to seek these out. And my way of thinking is that I want to be what some of these people call super-agers, right? I want to die young, happy, at a very advanced old age. And in order to do that, you've got to work this shit, right? Getting old is not for wimps. And so at that point, it was like, well, David Wilcock's conclusions are soft, without reasoning, at best. And I found this with a lot of his Cozy Rev stuff, so I kind of left all of his stuff behind. I'm going to have to go, guys. Stomach is growling at me. Thanks for putting up with this. I hope that CW has a chance to look at it and see his see my little continuum for him, because you can analyze people, So I'll just divert for a second, right? Let's get a real life example, one of those nice little parables that universe presents. I saw this guy on YouTube. This was a year back, and he was saying, "Oh shit," his head hurt. He had a big welt across the top of his head. Young kid, maybe early 20s, maybe. And this guy said, yeah, his head hurt like hell, and he was part of Black Bloc. These people that dress up in the black suit and put on masks and go and beat old people with these let's go beat old people with sticks thing. And he described it. And this guy was just cool as hell because he was honest. He was self-examining. He understood what had happened to him to some degree, and he was examining his participation in it and coming to some really cool conclusions. And basically, this is what happened. He was with 4 other guys. They were beating on this old Nazi, they call him, up against a concrete wall where the guy could not escape. This was with some kind of other larger confrontation. This kid that's telling the tale is over there, and he's described himself as wearing his mask with his hoodie, and he's some kind of a stick, and he's hitting the guy. And the next thing he knows, he's being clocked on top of his head by something, and he goes reeling off to the side, and he sees that there's like 5 or 6 old Nazis coming to rescue the other old Nazi. His characterization, okay, and 2 or 3 of them were over there kicking the shit out of the kid, the guy telling the story, and the kid said all 4 of his friends ran. He screamed. The kid that's telling the story said he screamed bloody murder, and there were hundreds of his black bloc buddies over there within just a few feet of him. Nobody came to help him. So, kid recognizes, and then he asked in the camera, he says, so why is it that these old Nazis came and put their ass on the line at risk to protect this other old Nazi, but his buddies wouldn't put their ass on the line to help protect him? And it's like, something ain't right, this shit ain't right. And so he was actually on the trail of starting to analyze reality and come to the appropriate conclusion that what had been lacking there was that the black bloc it doesn't respect any of the bottom 3. They espouse the top 2, but they're really authoritarians trying to get their maturity shit together and impose that projection on the rest of us, because the strange energies from space are hitting their brains, but they ain't got any loyalty to their own kind. And as he said in his videos, the last time he's going with those guys, so he wised up. And that's kind of like sort of where we're at, right? And so my suggestion to people that can reason still, that are not trapped by the strange energies from space and stuff, is to do that reasoning and sidestep this shit. Don't get caught up in it. Don't add rather don't dissipate your your life energy on stuff that won't return value to you, because getting stuck anything less than all 5 is a road to self-defeating behavior. And as I say, I honor CW. And so this is my criticism of some of his thinking, by the way. Give me some shit for that later, I'm quite sure. Thanks, guys. I gotta go get some chow. I'll talk to you later.